Imagine, if you will, like a book so dangerous that it was outright rejected by the legendary poet T.S. Eliot,
Right.
and a book that was almost successfully suppressed by a secret Soviet spy operating, deep inside the British government.
Which is just wild.
It really is. And then, once it finally saw the light of day, it would go on to be banned by various countries and political groups all around the world, but for entirely different reasons.
Oh, absolutely.
And the punchline to all of this incredibly dangerous, subversive text, is basically a 92-page fairy story about talking farm animals.
It really is one of the most remarkable publishing stories of the 20th century. I mean, it's this slender fable that somehow managed to terrify governments and intellectuals alike.
Yeah, totally. So, welcome to this deep dive. Today, we're taking a stack of sources from, historical deep dives on Wikipedia mapping out George Orwell's life to comprehensive literary breakdowns from lit charts and spark notes.
Good stuff.
Yeah, and our mission today is to explore the turbulent history of Animal Farm, decode its brilliant political allegory, and discover how the harrowing real-world experiences of its author forged like one of the most powerful warnings against totalitarianism ever written.
Definitely.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we aren't just summarizing a novel you might have skimmed in high school. This is a look at the hidden mechanics of power and how language is weaponized in our everyday lives, right under our noses.
The enduring power of this book lies exactly there. It is a dissection of how revolutions are stolen.
Right.
And to see how that theft happens, we really have to look at the immediate historical parallels Orwell was drawing.
So let's start with the farm and the setup of the whole thing. The sources point out that the basic plot of the novella functions as a direct, almost one-to-one mapping of the Russian Revolution of 1917.
Right, and the subsequent rise of Joseph Stalin.
Exactly. So we start at Manor Farm. It's this poorly run place managed by the completely irresponsible Mr. Jones. And the sources explicitly tell us Mr. Jones represents Tsar Nicholas II.
Yeah, he neglects the animals, they starve, and eventually they are inspired by a prize boar named Old Major.
Right. And tell us about Old Major, because he seems to be carrying like a lot of ideological weight for one pig.
He really is. He's a fascinating composite character.
Yeah.
The sources note he represents a mix of Karl Marx, the ideological creator of communism, and Vladimir Lenin.
The leader of the early Soviet nation.
Exactly. So Old Major teaches the animals a revolutionary song called Beasts of England and lays out this vision of a society completely free from human exploitation.
A utopia, basically.
Yeah, he gives them the theory, the dream of a flat hierarchy where all animals share the fruits of their labor.
And the crazy thing is, the animals actually pull it off. They overthrow Jones, rename the place Animal Farm, and establish the 7 commandments of animalism.
With the most famous being all animals are equal.
Right. But, a power vacuum never stays empty for long. 2 young pigs step up to take charge. There's Snowball, who the sources map to Leon Trotsky, and Napoleon, who represents Joseph Stalin.
And Napoleon seems to understand something about power that Snowball just doesn't.
Oh, definitely.
Napoleon plays the long game. I mean, while Snowball is busy drawing up complex blueprints for a windmill to improve the farm's infrastructure.
Which takes him forever, by the way.
Right. While he's doing that, Napoleon is quietly building a monopoly on violence. He secretly takes a litter of puppies away from their mothers and raises them in total isolation to be his personal, vicious attack dogs.
Wow, and this is Orwell's direct stand-in for the KGB, right? The Soviet secret police.
Exactly. Napoleon doesn't debate Snowball. He simply unleashes those massive dogs, chases Snowball off the farm entirely, and consolidates supreme, unquestioned power.
It is such a brutal coup. And the real tragedy isn't just what happens to Snowball, it's how the other animals are exploited in the aftermath.
Oh, absolutely.
The sources heavily highlight the character of Boxer, the incredibly strong, dedicated cart horse. His personal mottos are, "I will work harder," and Napoleon is always right.
Yeah, Boxer represents a very specific phenomenon. The Stakhanovite workers. The Stakhanovite movement. It was a real Soviet propaganda campaign in the 1930s. The state elevated these hyper-productive, self-sacrificing miners and factory workers to, like, celebrity status.
Oh, wow. So they were the influencers of the factory floor.
Pretty much. The idea was to create immense peer pressure. If this one guy can mine 14 times his quota, why are you complaining about a 14-hour shift?
That is incredibly manipulative.
It was. And Boxer internalizes this guilt and this drive. He believes his own suffering is a moral virtue.
And his reward for all that backbreaking loyalty. He literally works himself to the point of collapse hauling stone for Napoleon's windmill.
Yeah.
And instead of letting him retire, Napoleon secretly sells him to a knacker like a glue boiler just so the pigs can buy themselves a case of whiskey.
It is absolutely
It
gut-wrenching.
really is. You know, reading through how this betrayal unfolds, the whole thing reminds me of like a visionary tech startup.
A startup. How does that map to the farm?
Well, think about the trajectory. You have this visionary founding mission statement, Old Major's animalism, promising equity, shared profits, and a completely flat hierarchy for all the early employees.
Okay, yeah, I see where you're going.
And everyone is working insanely long hours toward this utopian goal, but then a ruthless new CEO, Napoleon, takes over.
Right.
He steals the intellectual property Snowball's windmill blueprints, forces out the original co-founder, and then just grinds the loyal employees like Boxer into the dirt while hoarding all the equity and perks for his inner circle.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, let's push that analogy even further because it captures the exact mechanism of betrayal Orwell was highlighting.
Yeah.
It's like a toxic startup where the CEO not only steals the IP, but then uses an incredibly manipulative HR department to gaslight the overworked employees into thinking they never actually had stock options to begin with.
Oh, man. That is painfully accurate.
Right. And Orwell intended virtually every single detail in this story to have a specific political significance. He even pointed out what he considered the absolute turning point of the story, the moment the dream truly died.
And it happens very early on, doesn't it? Right after the revolution, before the windmill or the dogs.
Yes.
Is it when the pigs secretly appropriate the farm's milk and apples entirely for themselves?
That is the moment. The pigs claim they need the milk and apples for their brain work, basically saying their management roles entitle them to luxury while the rest of the animals eat, basic rations.
Classic management.
Exactly. And the sources note that Orwell used this specific theft as an analogy for the 1921 Kronstadt Revolt.
The Kronstadt Revolt. Break that down for us because that sounds like a piece of history that usually just gets buried.
It does. The Kronstadt sailors were the vanguard of the 1917 Russian Revolution. They were the most loyal, fierce supporters of the Bolsheviks. But by 1921, they realized Lenin's party was simply replacing the Tsar's dictatorship with their own centralized dictatorial power. The workers were starving, the state was seizing grain, and the revolutionary councils were being stripped of power.
So they push back.
They mutinied. They demanded free elections and freedom of speech for workers.
Yep.
And Lenin's response was to send the Red Army to crush them, slaughtering thousands.
Wow.
Yeah. For Orwell, the milk and apples represent that Kronstadt moment, the exact instant the revolutionary hierarchy decided their own survival and comfort superseded the ideals of the revolution.
The hierarchy didn't disappear, it just changed hands.
Precisely.
The tragic irony of Napoleon stealing the milk is that it mirrored exactly what Orwell was seeing in the real world like, a betrayal of ideals that he was desperately trying to warn people about.
Yes.
But getting that warning printed turned out to be just as fraught as the Animals' Rebellion. He wrote the book between November 1943 and February 1944. And the historical context here is critical, right?
Very. The UK was in a wartime alliance with the Soviet Union against Nazi Germany.
Right.
And the British intelligentsia held Stalin in very high esteem at that moment. The Red Army was absorbing the brunt of the Nazi war machine, and criticizing Stalin was deeply, deeply taboo in London.
Like you just didn't do it.
You didn't. It was a climate of intense self-censorship. The Ministry of Information had even put out a booklet for propagandists instructing them to claim that the Red Terror, the mass killings carried out by the early Soviet government, was just a figment of the Nazi imagination.
That is terrifying. So Orwell is shopping this manuscript around and doors are just slamming in his face.
Everywhere.
T.S. Eliot, who was a director at the publisher Faber and Faber, rejected it. According to the sources, Eliot praised the writing but argued that what the world needed wasn't more communism, but rather more public-spirited pigs.
A critique that completely misses the point of the allegory.
Completely.
Eliot was essentially arguing that the system of pigs ruling over other animals was fine, as long as the pigs were slightly nicer. He entirely missed Orwell's point that the concentration of power itself is the corrupting force.
Here's where it gets really interesting. So another publisher, Jonathan Cape, actually accepted the book, but then he abruptly backed out.
Oh, yeah.
He was explicitly warned off by a senior official at the British Ministry of Information. And the sources reveal that this official, a man named Peter Smollett, was later unmasked as an actual Soviet spy working for the NKVD.
It sounds like a spy thriller, but this is the reality of bureaucratic power. Smollett didn't need a poisoned dart or a silenced pistol to stop Orwell.
Right. He just needed official stationery.
Exactly. He convinced the publisher that the flagrant anti-Soviet bias was unacceptable for the war effort, and that choosing pigs as the ruling class was especially offensive to the Russians.
Isn't it just incredible that a book specifically condemning censorship and totalitarianism was almost successfully censored by the so-called free world just to keep a totalitarian wartime ally happy?
This is deeply ironic, and Orwell was infuriated by what he called voluntary censorship. He despised the idea that free societies would police their own thoughts out of political convenience.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The sources note that he actually wrote a preface for the book titled The Freedom of the Press. In it, he blisteringly criticized British journalists for suppressing unflattering facts about Stalin out of sheer cowardice.
Did that preface ever get published?
Well, the sad coda to that is the preface wasn't even published with the original book. It was lost in the shuffle and only discovered decades later in 1972.
Wow. And the book only finally achieved its massive commercial success when it was published in August 1945.
The timing was impeccable.
Right as the Cold War was beginning. The geopolitical winds shifted, the public's rose-colored glasses regarding the USSR were starting to slip off, and suddenly the world was ready to hear what Orwell had to say.
It took a literal global realignment for this book to see the light of day. But its success asks us to consider something deeper about its author.
Which is exactly where we need to go next. Like, how was Orwell able to see through the political fog so clearly? When the rest of the British intelligentsia was making excuses for Stalin, how did he write this flawless allegory? To understand that, the sources take us into the crucible of his own life. The life of Eric Arthur Blair, which was his real name.
His background is the absolute key to his clarity. He was born in India and educated at the elite Eton College in England. But instead of going to university, he took a very different path. He joined the Imperial Police in Burma.
He was a colonial cop.
He was. And it was a profoundly alienating experience. He was the face of an oppressive system. He felt entirely trapped between a deep hatred for the British Empire he was serving and the daily, intense hostility of the local people he was policing.
That sounds like a nightmare.
It was. He could see the disconnect between the British elite's self-image as benevolent civilizers and the brutal, extractive reality on the ground.
The sources mention he even got knuckle tattoos in Burma, supposedly to protect against snake bites and bullets. So he wasn't your typical aristocratic imperial officer. He eventually quit, totally disillusioned, and decided he needed to understand the absolute bottom rung of society.
Yes.
He went and lived among the poor, the tramps, and the destitute in Paris and London, doing menial labor like washing dishes. That experience actually became his book Down and Out in Paris and London.
He was actively stripping away his own privilege to understand the mechanics of poverty.
Yeah.
But the ultimate crucible, the experience that truly forged his political worldview, was the Spanish Civil War.
Right.
In late 1936, he went to Spain to fight against Francisco Franco's fascist uprising. He joined the POUM, which was an anti-Stalinist Marxist militia.
And he saw intense combat. He was shot through the throat by a fascist sniper.
Yeah.
The bullet missed his main artery by a millimeter, leaving him barely able to speak for a long time afterward. He didn't just study totalitarianism and war in a cozy London library. He took a literal bullet to the neck for his beliefs.
Yet the bullet wasn't the worst betrayal he faced in Spain. The real turning point of his life happened while he was recovering in Barcelona during what became known as the May Days.
What happened then?
Well, he was fighting alongside anarchists and Trotskyists. But Stalin's Soviet Union, which was supplying arms to the Spanish Republic, didn't want a radical, uncontrollable revolution in Spain. They wanted to appease Western allies.
Oh, I see.
So the Stalin-backed forces arrived in Barcelona not just to fight Franco, but to purge the left-wing elements that didn't take orders from Moscow.
So they turned their guns on their own allies.
They absolutely did. Orwell witnessed Soviet-backed communists brutally suppress, arrest, and spread vicious lies about his own comrades in the POUM. The Soviet-aligned press falsely painted them as fascist collaborators.
He and his wife, Eileen, literally had to flee Spain by train to escape treason charges that were entirely fabricated by the communists. When you read that in the sources, the emotional core of Animal Farm suddenly clicks into place. The fear, the paranoia, the feeling of your own comrades turning on you, he loved it. It feels viscerally real because it was.
We can synthesize this profound shift by quoting Orwell's own 1946 essay, Why I Write. He stated, Every line of serious work that I have written since 1936 has been written directly or indirectly against totalitarianism and for democratic socialism, as I understand it.
And it's worth pausing here to note, our goal today isn't to endorse Orwell's specific flavor of democratic socialism or take a political stance ourselves. We are purely tracing the historical blueprint of his mind to understand how his unique experiences built the foundation for this story.
A vital distinction. We are observing the history that generated the art. Because surviving that physical warfare and political betrayal in Spain led Orwell to a terrifying realization.
What was that?
That the most dangerous weapon of control isn't a sniper's bullet or a secret police purge, it's language.
Ah, yes. This is where Animal Farm elevates from a historical allegory to a timeless masterpiece. Orwell demonstrates how language is manipulated to reconstruct reality. Squealer the pig is the most terrifying character in the book, in my opinion.
Oh, Squealer is brilliant and horrifying. He's the propaganda minister. The sources note he represents the Soviet newspaper Pravda.
Right.
But looking closely at his methods reveals the how of manipulation. His entire job is to constantly twist language to justify Napoleon's increasingly corrupt actions.
He doesn't just lie, does he?
No, Squealer targets the animals' insecurities. Whenever they question the missing milk or the pigs sleeping in beds, Squealer uses a dizzying mix of fake statistics about crop yields combined with the ultimate thought-terminating cliché.
Oh, I know this one. He asks them, "Surely, comrades, you do not want Jones back."
That's the one.
He weaponizes their trauma. He uses the threat of the old dictator to shut down any criticism of the new dictator.
Exactly that. He forces a false binary. Either you accept our corruption or you go back to being slaughtered by humans.
The gaslighting is so insidious, and it happens so slowly you almost miss it. Remember those 7 commandments painted in giant letters on the side of the barn?
The core laws of the farm.
Yeah. As the pigs start breaking their own rules, they secretly climb a ladder at night and just alter the paint. The law, no animal shall sleep in a bed, quietly becomes, no animal shall sleep in a bed with sheets.
Right.
No animal shall drink alcohol turns into, no animal shall drink alcohol to excess.
The psychological effect of this is devastating. When the animals read with sheets, they doubt their own memories. Squealer leverages their lack of education against them.
Which is just cruel.
It is. He convinces them their memories are faulty, that the words on the wall have always been exactly like that. It is the literal rewriting of history in real time.
And if anyone still tries to start a debate, Napoleon uses the sheep. He trains them to just bleat, 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, over and over again. It drowns out any complex thought with a simplistic, rhythmic chant, which, chillingly, is later manipulated to 4 legs good, 2 legs better, once the pigs start walking on their hind legs and wearing human clothes.
It's a terrifying progression.
You know, looking at how perfectly Orwell mapped this to 1917 Russia, a skeptic might ask, if this is just a history lesson in a pig mask, why do we still care today? The Soviet Union is gone. Does it lose its relevance for a modern listener?
What's fascinating here is the sources explicitly argue that the book's survival proves its universal application. While Orwell's immediate target was Stalinism, the mechanisms depicted are an evergreen playbook for authoritarianism.
So it happens everywhere.
Exactly. The use of fear, the creation of scapegoats to blame for every farm failure, the gradual erosion of democratic norms, and most importantly, the weaponization of language to distort reality. These are not unique to one historical regime.
Right.
They can develop in varied political environments whenever institutional checks weaken and the populace stops paying attention to the words their leaders use.
It's a manual on how to spot the red flags.
It is. And the sources point out an incredible, almost tragic irony regarding the book's legacy. A book written as a stark warning against propaganda was eventually turned into literal propaganda itself.
You're talking about the CIA operation?
Yes, between 1952 and 1957, the CIA secretly funded an operation called a dinosaur.
Dinosaur.
Right. Because the Iron Curtain strictly controlled the flow of information, the CIA launched millions of balloons carrying translated copies of Animal Farm into Poland, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia.
That is wild.
It was a massive campaign of psychological warfare, dropping literal fairy tales from the sky to undermine communist regimes.
The sources also mentioned they secretly funded the 1954 animated film adaptation, right?
They did, and they altered the ending.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Orwell's original ending was cyclical and deeply pessimistic. The pigs just become the new humans. The CIA wanted a triumphant anti-communist victory, so they changed the animated film's ending to show the other animals getting help from the outside to successfully overthrow the pigs.
So the intelligence agencies of the West were secretly funding and altering his work to fight the Cold War. Orwell's nightmare about hidden agendas and manipulated media was happening to his own book.
Exactly. While it was being weaponized by some, it was being fiercely banned by others. And not just by the expected authoritarian regimes.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, it was banned in the USSR and faced strict restrictions in places like China and the United Arab Emirates, but it also faced censorship in the United States.
Really?
In 1965, the John Birch Society in Wisconsin challenged the reading of the book in schools specifically because of its reference to the masses revolting.
They saw the words masses revolting and panicked, completely missing the context that the book is a savage critique of how that revolt was corrupted.
They totally missed the irony,
It's amazing how a mirror can reflect so many different fears depending on who is looking into it. People read their own anxieties into the text.
which is the hallmark of a truly great allegory. It provides a framework for people to understand the power dynamics in their own societies.
So what does this all mean? We have gone on quite a journey today. We've traced how Eric Arthur Blair, a man who felt alienated as an imperial policeman in Burma, voluntarily lived among the destitute and narrowly survived a sniper's bullet and a political purge in the trenches of Spain.
Quite a life.
Right. We've seen how those harrowing experiences forged a writer who could distill the complex, sweeping horrors of totalitarianism into a deceptively simple fairy tale about farm animals. He survived paper shortages, cowardly publishers, and literal Soviet spies to create a piece of art that became a timeless cultural icon.
He took the darkest, most complicated political realities of his time and made the mechanisms of control visible to anyone.
Oh,
But he didn't leave us with an easy resolution.
no, we didn't.
I want to leave the listener with a final chilling image drawn straight from the very end of the novella.
Okay.
After years of backbreaking labor and suffering, the animals outside look through the farmhouse window. Inside, Napoleon and the other pigs are having a dinner party and playing cards with Mr. Pilkington and the other human farmers, the very oppressors they once overthrew.
Whoa.
A violent argument breaks out over cheating at cards. And as the exhausted animals outside look from pig to man and from man to pig and from pig to man again, they realize it is already impossible to say which is which. The faces have completely merged.
The liberators became the exact thing they swore to destroy.
They did. And that is the final thought I want to invite you to ponder in your own life. And as you observe the power structures around you, how quickly can the tools, the rhetoric, and the movements we use to tear down oppressive systems become the very systems themselves if we stop paying attention to the words we use?
That is a thought that will definitely stick with you. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the sources. We hope you enjoyed exploring the muddy waters of history, language, and power. Keep asking questions, keep reading critically, and we'll catch you next time.